Hello everybody, welcome to this session. We're doing a series of sessions focusing on individual aspects of Patronum. We thought it would be useful to do it in this way rather than trying to cover all of the features in one big session and find it all a bit too confusing. We're breaking it down and having a session on each feature. And I think the idea would then be that you could play this back at some point in the future, and instead of having to wade through hours of videos, you could dive into just the particular session that you're interested in. In this one, I'm going to be looking at the people management aspects of Patronum. If you've seen any of our previous sessions, you will have heard me talk about policies and managing people and various onboarding and offboarding and things like that. This one is more to do with the sort of ad hoc day-to-day management that you would do using Patronum really as a replacement for the Google admin console. So what you can see in front of me or front of you here is the people view. We've got the menu down on the left-hand side. By the way, you can collapse this menu using the little 3-bar menu item on the left. So once you have got to grips with and you understand what each of the icons mean, you can move that out of the way and give yourself a little bit more screen real estate. What we've got here is currently a card view of all of the users in our environment. We can change this view using the little icon up at the top here. We can go to a chart view, which would give us, if I had any direct reports in my team here, it would show me my direct reports in a kind of an org chart sort of display. Or we can go for a traditional list kind of view if that's the kind of thing that you prefer. What I'm going to do is jump into a particular user here. You can see we've got a search bar at the top. We've also got a filter option here. So if I wanted to filter the view, whether it's the list or the card view or whatever, I could filter using all the various attributes that you might find in your directory. Or you can just do a straight search. So let me just clear that out and just do a straight search. I'm going to search for a user I know here called Anne Moore. And here she is. And if I can click into this, if there were more than one results, I'd see more cards here, but I know there's only one and more in our environment. So I'm going to click into this and it'll take me into the more detailed view. Now, if you've seen our policy views, you will be familiar with some of these tabs across the top here, and we'll jump into each of these and talk a little bit more. I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail because some of it is fairly self-evident, but I will just highlight what you can do in each of these sections and why it might be important to you. So first of all, the high level. Actually, no, before we jump into that, let me just show you what you've got up at the top here. Obviously, we've got the profile, the profile picture, which we could change if we need to. We've got information around Anne here, which org unit she's in when she signed in and so on. But over in the top right, I've got buttons that allow me to do a password reset, to rename Anne if I want to, or to remove Anne, start the offboarding process. And on the overflow menu here, I've got a variety of other options as well, suspending and doing data transfers, moving her to a different org unit and so on. Setting an end date is something that we do use in our policies. You may have heard me before if you've seen sessions where we can use an end date as a trigger for the offboarding process. And that's a really, really powerful thing to do, particularly if you've got temporary staff or interns and things like that. If you've defined an end date, you can then have an offboarding policy that'll just trigger automatically. Now, onto the information down below. In the profile section, this is exactly what you would expect to see. All the contact information and employment information, the stuff that you would see in a user profile in the Google directory. But we've also created this other little card down at the bottom here showing us what direct reports Anne has. And if Anne had a manager defined, you would see that as an org chart as well, seeing Anne's sort of boss manager. I've got the pencil icons where I can click in here and start editing any of this information if I want to change anything like that. All the standard fields from the Google directory are available here. You can see we scroll through, they're all here. But we also have the ability to create custom attributes via Patronum. Now that adds an additional attribute into the Google directory. It's important to note here that we're not storing this as separate information outside of Google. All the data here is in the Google directory. But by creating custom attributes, it allows you to enhance your profile information, add additional fields that might be useful for you. Who knows? That's entirely for you to figure out. But if you do decide you want to add attributes, you click on that button. You can type in the information that you want in this attribute, the name of it, what type of information it might be, whether it's just a yes/no field or whether it's an email type field, and all the rest of it, and so on. Whether it shows up in the directory or not, or only to administrators. Whether you can have multiple values in that field. So if it's something like a skills field, maybe it's multiple languages that somebody speaks. A key part here is whether this field is going to be editable by only the administrators or by the user themselves. So there will be some attributes that you're happy for users to maintain themselves, and that removes any sort of admin burden. But then there might be other fields that you're less inclined to let people update for themselves, and you want to keep that as an admin feature. So that's pretty straightforward. You add the details in there and save that, and then that is an additional field that's available for anybody to complete. Okay, so the profile, all the fields that you've got in the directory available in there for you to edit. Moving on to the next tab, this is the Groups tab. In here, as you would imagine, you're going to see the groups that this person is a member of, or what level of membership that they've got, and you can adjust that here. So here we've got Anne's a member of these three groups. We can change, using the drop down here, what level of access Anne has into that group. If I want to remove Anne from any of these groups, I would just select it here and click on the little dustbin that appears up at the top here. And if I want to add Anne into any more groups, I can click the plus, the floating action button, as they call it, up here. Click on that, decide what level of access I want to give Anne to the group, and then type in the name of the group here. Called Scotland or something. There we go, Scotland group, Scotland. And I could add Anne in as a member of that group, like that. You want to take a drink. Okay. The calendars section shows us which calendars Anne has got access to. There's obviously her own calendar here, and we can actually have a look at the events. I don't think Anne will have anything in because it's just a demo account. Actually it does. It's full of stuff. So here we go. Lots and lots of events that Anne's got in the calendar here that we can review. I can also change the settings of this calendar, and this is particularly useful for people that find themselves outside of North America. Google often defaults the calendar location to North American time zones. So in here, you could click on this and you can change the time zone for this calendar, something that's often overlooked when onboarding users, and they might find themselves showing up for meetings at the wrong time. You can also change the permissions here on Anne's calendar, and the events that Anne creates in her calendar, are they private to her, or are they going to be visible throughout the whole organization? On the right hand side here, we've got a view of the other calendars that Anne has got access to. So here we can see she's got the kind of general holidays calendar for the UK. But you can use, again, the floating action button to add another calendar that Anne should have visibility of. So maybe she needs to have visibility of one of her teammates' calendars. So you would type the name in here, and that would grant Anne access to that calendar. Just like the delegation, if Anne was doing this herself, she can delegate access to her calendar. But here as an admin, you're able to do it on her behalf. Okay, moving on to the Contacts tab. As you can imagine, this is going to have any contacts that Anne's got showing up in here. So here we are, all the various contacts that Anne's got in her contacts list, quite a lot of them, 12,000 or so. And on the left-hand side, we see the labels that Anne has created to keep her contacts organized. And what this allows us to do is to share contacts from Anne's contacts list via a label to other people. So maybe Anne maintains a list of suppliers or something like that. Well, you could share that list of suppliers to other people in the organization using that share button there. I'm not going to go through that in detail. We might do another video just on contact sharing, because it can be quite a powerful feature, but it probably is a bit too deep for what we're covering today. Again, I've got the ability to just add another contact in here for Anne, and this would just be a standalone contact in Anne's own My Contacts app, and I could fill in all the details for her there. Okay, moving on to Files. This gives us a view of what Anne can see in her own Google Drive. So that's the My Drive view, and it also gives us a view of which shared drives Anne has got access to. So the My Drive view is quite a useful feature. You know, ordinarily, if I, as an administrator, was wanting to see what Anne has got in her My Drive, Google doesn't really provide a nice user interface to do that. I would probably have to maybe change Anne's password and log into her account and have a look like that, you know, assuming she's away or something, or I have to use APIs and it all becomes a bit tricky. So what we give you here is a nice user interface that allows me to look directly at Anne's My Drive files. And then I can do things with them, so that she's got a folder here called SLT files. And you can see I've got the option to change the sharing settings on that, or share it out to other people, change the links, delete it if I need to, anything like that. So quite useful in those situations where maybe Anne's on vacation and somebody in her team needs access to something. Well, I, as the administrator, or somebody who's been granted the right permissions, can go in to Anne's account and do it that way without needing to change her password and so on. Similarly, with the shared drive view, if I close that up a sec and open shared drives, we would see, I'm not sure if Anne's got any access to any shared drives. So I would see what shared drives Anne's got access to there. One thing I didn't mention, on the My Drive view, there is a little icon up here that allows you to export all of the My Drive list to a CSV file. So that's not the content of all of those files, it's basically the list of files. So if you needed to do some kind of analysis of how many files has Anne got here, you know, what are they all called, and this kind of stuff, and you could do that for multiple users equally. If I need to slim down the view, I've got a filter here, and I can filter down by, you know, name, type, whether it's a shared file or not. Okay, moving on to the Signature tab. This is where we can get a view of Anne's email signature. Now I can manipulate that here. I can make any changes I want to. We've done lots of videos on email signatures, so you can have a look at those if you want to understand the detail of how I would edit an email signature here. Suffice it to say, our preferred approach is to change email signatures via a policy so that they affect multiple users rather than doing it on an individual basis. So I can do it here, but there's quite a high likelihood that this signature was created by a policy. And if I change it here, it's equivalent to changing it directly in the Gmail settings. And when the policy executes again, it'll revert my changes back to the standard policy defined signature. So just something to bear in mind. If you're not using a signature policy, then of course you can edit the email signatures individually in this way, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, the Settings tab. This is largely equivalent to what you would find in the Gmail settings, plus a few extra bits and pieces which we'll get to. So again, useful scenario, if somebody's gone on vacation, they've forgotten to set up their vacation responder, well, as an admin, you can come in here and you can fill in all of those details and set up the automatic response for them. If somebody would like help creating their Gmail labels, you can do that in here. You can create the labels for them, decide whether or not they are visible in the labels list or whether they appear on the message itself. Sometimes that's quite a useful thing if you've got people who don't quite understand how labels work versus if they're coming from an Outlook environment or something where they're familiar with folders and things. Well, maybe get them started by creating a few useful labels for them. I can configure email aliases here. So if I need to allow Anne to send email using a different email address, maybe it's like senior leadership team @ or whatever, then I can create aliases for her in this way. And I can also manage any email forwarding assignments, just like you can in the Gmail settings, provided the global policy allows email forwarding, of course. If Anne needs help creating any filters or editing any of the filters that she's got set up in her email, then you can do that in here. And just a reminder for anybody that's new to Gmail, filters are ways of automating the organization of your email, really. If it matches a certain criteria, then you do something with that email, whether it's putting a label on it or maybe even automatically replying with a standard email or so on. So, excuse me, this is a great way of helping a user who's maybe got a filter that's not working exactly as they would expect it to. You can come in here, have a look at it and see what's going on. Excuse me a sec. Now, while it's still available as an option, we've got the ability to set the POP and IMAP access methods for email. Again, it's something that some organizations still using sort of thick client applications and need POP and IMAP to access emails. Well, again, you can set it here as an administrator on behalf of this user. If Anne needs to delegate her mailbox, maybe she's got an executive assistant or something like that, then, or a team member that needs access to her mailbox, and we can help with that and do that in here as well. So this is showing me that Dean here has got access to Anne's account and Anne has access to Ella's account. So I can manipulate this in both ways. I can create additional delegations in either direction using the add button up here. Now there's a whole bunch of things under the security section here. A lot of these are to do with your backup codes, your recovery information, that kind of thing. I'm not going to go through each of those in detail, but suffice it to say, this is where you can change all of that information if you need to. If Anne's got a mobile device, we can configure the settings and things for that here through the mobile management section. And then moving on, these last two, licenses and roles. If you've been using Patronum in the past, you may be wondering what these are doing here, because they used to appear as separate tabs across the top here until we had a little bit of a reorganization recently. And basically, we were running out of space for all the extra features that we were adding to these tabs across the top. So we decided to move these features into the settings section. And it kind of makes perfect sense, because the licenses is about assigning different licenses to this user, and the roles is about defining which security role this user has. So you can see here, in this case, Anne has been given the Room Insights role, which allows her to have visibility of the meeting room assignments and so on. Maybe you're delegating some level of administration to a user, and this is where you can do it by assigning the roles in here. There's quite a lot going on here in the settings section. We have done other videos that dive into a little bit more detail on this. If you've got any questions about any of it, please reach out to us through the chat channels and normal ways, so we can answer those if we're able to. But moving on, the backup tab. This is really if you've got the Patronum backup product, which is a white label of a product called AFI. This allows you to set a backup regime, or an SLA, as we call it, service level agreement, for this particular user. Now, in this case, Anne is currently not being protected. I could select here and apply one of the SLAs that have been predefined in the backup product to apply to Anne. And then from this point on, Anne would be subject to that backup regime. The Spaces section is Google Chat Spaces. So one of the problems I've certainly come across in many organizations is people not knowing what chat spaces are out there, or creating chat spaces when there's already a chat space available for the particular topic or project or whatever it is that they're interested in. So Being able to, as an administrator, assign people to relevant chat spaces without them having to go hunting for it or whatnot is a real benefit. And that's exactly what this is for. So in here, we can see all the chat spaces that Anne is already a member of and what level she's got. So very similar to the groups kind of scenario. And we could change the role from member to manager here. We can also add Anne to additional chat spaces using the floating action button up above here, and again choosing what level of access that she should have. If I want to remove any Anne from any of these groups, I can just hover over them and click the remove button. Or if I'm doing multiple, then I would use the tick boxes and then use the bin icon at the top. And then lastly, the last tab here for the moment is the policy tab. Now this one, this really shows us which of our Patronum policies. Now, just point out on our left-hand side here, we've got policies. These are the policies that we use in Patronum to automate the management of your Google Workspace environment. And this view shows us which of our policies touch Anne, really, or which are have Anne within the scope of those policies. So if you've seen the other videos, you will know that when we define a policy, we define the scope of that policy, and that's really which org users, organizational units, which groups, and so on, this policy should affect. And this is a way of just confirming for ourselves which of the policies are going to be impacting Anne. Okay. So that's a fairly rapid run through of just the people section. As I say, we're doing these in sort of bite-sized sessions so that we don't overwhelm everybody with too much information in one go. So look out for other sessions coming up where we'll look at the other menu items and the other sections and features. Okay. If you've got any questions, as always, use the chat and reach out to us, and we will do our best to answer you. Thanks.